All right, so in this video, I'm gonna try to improve on our fuzzy matching we did in the last one using Fuzzy Pandas. Now, if you didn't watch that video, I recommend you check that out. Now, in this video, I'm gonna try to do that matching using this library Fuzzy Wuzzy, and again, it's a Python library. So we'll be working with the same data. In the last video, what we did, we had this. Well, we didn't have this. Let me get rid of that. So we had this data and we had this data. And then using our Fuzzy Pandas, we've tried to basically get some matching. And then I had to go clean this up manually to get to something closer to what we need to actually do the VLOOKUP matching to put it all together by bringing the stocks using this company names that didn't exactly match this company names. So that's pretty much the same thing we're going to do. We're going to use the same two tables, only we'll be using this library. And this library is based on Levenstein distance, which is one of the methods that we had available in Fuzzy Pandas. But what it does allow you to do is to narrow down to some specific things like the percentage of the match. So by using that percentages, I want to be able to narrow it down better, so I have to do less work to go back and clean everything up. One other thing to remember is that this library is not a library for pandas. This is just a Python library. So we will have to figure out how we're going to fit this inside of pandas environment. So let's get started. So I'm going to be able to reuse some of this stuff. So basically the part that we just get the data in and all of that should be very similar. So let's just go ahead and open another Google Colab, a new one separate from this. Start a new notebook and name this. And I'll just go copy paste some things from the previous thing. So we need to install this. We need to import most of these things. We're probably not going to need the regular expression import, so I'm going to skip that. I will copy all of these. That's how we get to the spreadsheet. Again, all of this I did explain in my previous videos. If you want to go ahead and watch those to understand what's happening here, I'm not going to go over it again. So those were our spreadsheet imports. We are going to need that function I've created here to clean up the data again as much as possible in the beginning to remove those incorporated company, all that type of stuff. And then we will need to use these same things to clean it up. We are not going to use this though, because this was that Fuzzy Pandas. So that's good. So that's some starter code for us. I should be able to close that. Now we need to install this other library that I'm going to need. So let's go ahead and get the installation for that. There it is. So exclamation sign we need to add because of that installation. And we are going to also need to import this. So we're importing Fuzzy Pandas here. We're not going to be importing that. Instead, we'll import this library. So see, we're going to need to import these two lines. We don't need those lines in front, so it should just be like this. So that should import everything we need. So let's go ahead and run all of this to make sure all of this works, and then we'll get going from there. So that one is installed. Let's go ahead and install this one too. Looks good. Let's import this. Now we need to get access for our spreadsheet. As usual, copy the code, go in here and paste, hit enter. That's fine. I'm going to ignore that. So now we're going to run this to import the spreadsheet. with that ID. We'll then get the location tab and then get the tickers and then run this function, then get the clean column. So at this point, if we look at this data frame, that should be this basically. That's this worksheet with an extra column that's a cleaned up company name column. And then if I look at this one, locations, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to have that extra CO clean column. That's basically this one cleaned up and normalized at least as much as we did last time. So with that in mind, now let's get into using Fuzzy Wuzzy library. So let's get into their docs. So if I scroll down here, let's try to find an example where we're searching for a phrase within a list of phrases. So see here as an example, given a list of choices, basically it's a regular Python list. We then can run this to get the best 2 matches. And that gives us this list of what seems to be tuples. All right, so that's something we could use. So this is a list of choices, and this is what we're searching. Let's just test this in our code. And make sure it actually runs the way it's supposed to. So I'm going to run this line to get the list, and then we should be able to run this to get that list of choices. And that works fine. See the one that's matching exactly like New York Jets right here, we get 100 as a score. And everything else is going to be a lower score. So now in our case, so let's say we're working with our list. So if we had a list we had to work with and we're trying to find, let's say, this company in this list of companies, we basically have to make sure we get one of these lists to that list where we're going to be searching. So that will be the choices. So in our case, I'm going to get this list to a Python regular list. So let's go ahead and get this column first of all. So that's from this data frame tickers. And the column is called name. So there it is. Now we need to get this to a regular Python list. So we should be able to do 2 list, I believe, in this. And if not, we'll do 2 numpy to list. Looks like that 2 list worked just fine. So we don't need to do the numpy. But this is not really the column we want, actually. We want the cleaned up column. So if you remember our data frame here, we have this added column now. That's that cleaned up CO clean column. That's really where we're trying to do the matching. So let's go ahead and change this to OC clean, which is that column. And that should give us a nice list. Oh, it's CO clean, not OC. There we go. Now we have our list. Now that will be basically, in this case, this choices. So let's just put that in here. So now if we're trying to find, let's say, Walmart in this list, we should be able to do this by running this line. Well, maybe I should run this first to make sure our choices is updated and then run this. So as you can see, we found 2. Apparently there's one that's just called M, but we got this Walmart stores as one of the options, and we got this one as a second option, and both of them have score of 90. Now, if we change this to limit 3, we may get more results. So let's try that. So see, now we have 3 results, and these are the first 2, and then we have this third one. Now let's try to do something that's actually available in the list, because in this case, see that Walmart was Walmart stores, not Walmart. So let's try to, let's say, search for Microsoft. So after all the cleanup and removing corporation, that should be available exactly like that. So if I go and change the search I'm trying to do to Microsoft, see, I get 100 score for Microsoft, and then I get 70 for these other 2. So what I want to do, I want to be able to basically do this search. And then if I find 100%, I don't really need to look at the rest. And if I find that none of them is 100%, at that point, I will just basically return the remaining options and we'll limit it, I guess, to 3. And the second thing I want to do, if you remember when we did the last time, we got all these separate lines for these matches. So when we had like 2 matches, it would basically return like this, 2 separate lines. I want to return those lines as separate columns instead of adding more lines in this particular case. So let's see how we're going to make that happen. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to leave this alone for a second and then we'll come back to it. So let's just think about how do we apply a change to a column in a data frame. So in this particular case, let's say I'm just trying to run through all of these locations for these companies in this column and do some sort of change to all of those and return that as an extra column. Now I did that with those str method last time, but this time I want to create my own function that's going to make the changes. So let's just extract this company column from this locations data frame. And again, remember, we don't want the company itself. We just want the clean company. So it's really going to be this. So right now, if I just look at this, that's basically that column. See, 500 lines starting from 0, that's 500. That's basically this data right here. So now I want to run some function over each one of these records. So the way I could do that, I could use apply on this. So this is very similar if you're familiar with JavaScript like map. We're basically mapping a function over this result. And similar to Python map, I guess. So what we need to do in this apply, we basically need a callback function. And that callback function could be a Lambda function. But in this case, I'm going to actually create my own function. So let's just do another code block here. And let's just define a function here on top. I'm going to create a function. Well, I'm calling it FM for fuzzy matching. For now, we're not going to be doing fuzzy matching yet. This function is going to accept an argument right here in this parentheses. And that argument each time is going to be one of those values in that list. So let's just call that CEO for company. So we're going to get the CEO and then we're going to return, let's say, the first character of that company. So that should allow us to do that. So now I should be able to pass this function to this apply function, FM. So let's first of all run this to have this function definition. And then if I just run this, so you can see what happens. See, we got basically this first initial from that column. Now that's not going to be inside of our data frame. So if I go back and look inside of that DF locations, see, there is no extra column like this. If you want to add that column, then you have to basically assign this to a new column. So what we would have to do, we would have to say DF, I'm going to call it CO match. So now if I run this and then go back and look inside of this data frame, you'll see we have that extra column, which is basically the first initial from this. So that was basically a very basic example how we can run a function over each element in this list, do something with that function, and return a result. So in this case, that function takes each element and returns the first character by getting the first index, which is 0. Now, in our case, however, we're going to try to do something a little more complicated. We're going to have to do this matching using this process and then get those results. So the question is, how can we now, however, return multiple columns? Because my intention is to return more than one column in the final data frame instead of just adding one extra column. Because I may have more than one match and I also want to get the score. So for that, what I can do, I can actually run this apply on the data frame itself instead of running it on series. So I'm just gonna pass that apply to the whole data frame like this. And for now, I'm not gonna assign it to anything. We will assign it back to the data frame itself once it's done. But now when we do apply, we're basically gonna get that whole row from the data frame. So this parameter here will be the row itself. And then we can get to one of the rows. So if I wanted to get the same results out of this, I would have to get to the right column in that row. And the right column we were working with was that CO clean column. And then from that, I can extract the first character again. Now, another thing I have to do, I'm going to run this to keep that function in the memory. Another thing I need to do, I need to also, because this is now going to be over the whole data frame, I need to also pass the axis over which we're mapping or applying this function. So we basically have two options here. See, 0 or index, that apply function to each column. We want to apply that function to each row. So we need to use this 1 or columns option. So I'm just going to say 1. So now if I run this so you can see what happens, you'll see that what happened, I only got that one column by running over this data frame. Now again, we could basically put it inside of a series at this point. But another thing we could do, we could just go here inside of our function and assign it to a new column in that row. So I can just take that row, and in that row, I can create another column. And then when I'm returning, I'm going to return the whole row with all the columns in it. So with this change, if I run this function and then run this apply, you'll see that we get the entire data and that extra column. Now, we already had that CO match column because I had it before. So I would have to go back and redo this data if I don't want that extra column in there. Let's actually go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go back and re-import that locations data. And then I'm going to clean that locations data again. And now if we just do this over this again, see, we basically have the data, this cleaned up column, and this return from this match. But this will allow us to actually return multiple columns if we have to. So if I go back to this function, for example, and do another column, I'm going to call it match 2, I can then return something else. So let's just do the same thing with an underscore or something. So I'm going to run this and rerun this so you can see what happens. So see, we got this column and this column. So now we have a way to get inside of our data, map through it, and get multiple columns as a result. Now, what we're going to do inside of our function, we're going to be doing something similar to this. Remember, if we run this over these choices, we should be able to get this array. So I'm going to just grab this, go inside of this function, and what we're going to do, instead of doing this hard-coded Microsoft, I'm going to pass that cleaned up company name. That's what we're searching for in that row. So I'm going to copy this and put it right in here. So now we'll be basically getting that current company name. We'll be searching for that company name in this choices list, which is basically a list of companies from that other data frame from tickers. And when we do that, that should return this, the matching list. So let's just give this a name. So this will be a list at this point. So if we wanted to get to the first item in the list, this one, that should be item number 0. So as an example, if I just do matches 0 in here, and then let's also do matches 1 for the second one, which will be the second match. Let's just try to run this and see what happens. I'm going to redefine this function and run this apply all over again using this new function now. This could take a little bit. Okay, so that took longer than I expected, but here we go. We have our matches, but you can see what's going on here. So for example, see, we got this one. It says 90 as a score for Walmart. We have this Exxon. See, this is 100 score because it's exactly the same thing. And then there is this one, which is lower score. And then we have this one, which is 90 score, and this one that's 77. But that gives us like a starting point. So now my intention is this. If there is 100 score, I want to not return the rest of these matches. So I just want the first match, and I just want the match to show up in here in this column. And then I probably also want like a score column on the left that shows me what the score is. And only if there's no 100%, then I want to return the second and the third match. And again, I'm going to need the score for those matches too. So let's see how we're going to do that. When we find this, the first item in the list is going to be the highest score we get. If I just check the score of that item, it's 100, then I know we got a good match. So in that case, we can just do this. I'm going to create a Boolean variable. I'm going to call it exact match. And the way I'm going to know that, if I just take those matches, and in those matches, I'm going to get the first match. And in that first match, we need to get this second piece. So if that equals to 100, then we have exact match. So at this point, this will be true or it will be false. If it's 100, it will be true. Otherwise, it's going to be false. So now let's try to return those matches. So I'm going to do match 1, and then I'm going to do match 1 score. And this will be pretty straightforward. So it's just going to be the first one in the list, and the score is going to be the second item from that list. So I'm going to grab the first item, and this will be the match itself, and this, which is the second item, will be the score. So now let's try to take care of the other two columns. So I'm going to copy this and run over this one, and this will be the second match and the score for the second match. So what I'm going to do for that second match, basically, I need to check if it's exact match, then there is no need to return. So the way we can do that short, we basically can just return a blank, and I'm just going to do double quotes here. You could also do none, but I don't want to deal with nones with Google Sheets, so I'll just do this. So I'm going to return this empty text if that exact match is true. Else, I'm going to return the second match. So the same sort of thing we need to do for the score. This will just be the second one, like this. And then we need the third column, and it's going to be very similar to this. And this will be our match 3. And this will be coming from the third column from 0 index, that's basically 2. This is the third match, meaning this one, and then 0 would refer to the actual text in here, and 1 would refer to the score. So with this, I think this function should work. Now, in Python, we don't have that. Just double equals. There we go. So now we have our new function. Now I've noticed that library had this, see this second speed up example where it said that you could run this thing faster. For now, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep this the way it is. So let's just rerun this and wait a little bit and see what our results look like. Now, because I want to test this, I don't want to run this all over again over the whole data frame. So let's just try to test run this on a smaller set. And then if it's good, we'll run it on the whole thing. So let's just get like head 30 or so, get the first 30 records, and let's just apply that function over those 30 to see what it looks like. Okay, so let's take a look here. So as you can see, we got this one, see 90, 90, 90. Well, this one is 68 actually, but we got basically the match and the score. And then we got this one, which is 100, so it stopped at that point. So this seems good. See, when we have a match, score of 100. Otherwise, we get some other score where we could just look into it and see what's going on. Apple computers, it assigned 90, but it also has this other options where it assigned 90 score. So these are the cases when we're not exactly sure, but we have hundreds where we're sure. What's good about this method now for me is that I won't have to go through the entire database and check every single record when I'm trying to match all of this. Everything that's 100, I can just basically ignore. And anything that's not 100, those I can check and see which one is right and which one is wrong. So at this point, let's just go ahead and run this over the whole set and assign it to a variable so that we have it in a memory. So I'm just going to remove the head and we'll just create a new data frame here. So I'm going to run this. It's going to take a little bit and we'll get back when it's done. All right, so that took about 5-6 minutes. So we should probably do some optimizations here, which we could. But for now, let's just get this working. So I'm going to take a look at this just to make sure it looks fine. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm just going to write this back to the spreadsheet as another tab and just try to look through this and see how much better is this compared to the previous method I went through. So if I have a lot of high scores, then I will probably have a lot of good matches. Also, if you remember with the previous method, I was only able to, in the end of the day, match about a little over 300. Let's just go and see. 358, and some of these are duplicates too, so less than 358. So let's see how well this is going to work. So I'm going to just create this new tab. And let's just read this to our, so similar to how I have this. So now let's just write to that worksheet. And maybe before we write, we need to convert the data frame we have to a list of lists, which is this data frame. So let's just do that. And we're going to take it to NumPy and to list. And we also need the column names in the beginning. Which should work like this. So let's just verify that. Looks fine. Let's just write this to our spreadsheet. Starting from A1 cell, we're going to write that. All right, let's go take a look. So I want to see how much of this is actually already 100% to see how good this is to begin with. So I'm going to take this whole thing. Let's just sort it by this match one score column. So these are all the exact matches. See how far we get. So see, after that cleanup, apparently we're able to match 283 records exactly. And then the rest, this is where we need to do some manual work. So let's see how fast I can get through this list. So just to explain what I'm doing here, basically, I'm going to go over these records and I'm trying to see if these are actually accurate. Like, for example, these are accurate. And if they're accurate, they're accurate. I'm just going to keep the accurate as this next column next to this column. If they're not accurate, like in this case, and if there is no matching accurate record, I'm just going to delete that record out of here completely, like this. And if I do find a matching record, let's say it wasn't this first one, but it was the second one, I'm just going to copy that second one and paste it over this first one so that I have these two columns as my matching columns in the end. All right, so here's the interesting thing I found. So as I was looking through this, when I started going through this, by the time I got to lower than 90, vast majority of those were inaccurate. So I could have probably saved myself a lot of time to just filter this to anything above 90 or higher or something like that. but I guess that could vary depending on your data. But sorting like this, you could just probably quickly go through and see where is the cutoff where you don't get any good results and save yourself time to just drop the rest and whatever you have to look up. Maybe just do that part manually. But I got this, so I got about 347 that I could verify it's correct. So now we could use this as a table to match the rest together. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm just going to basically take this rest out, and just to keep this as a backup, I'm just going to make another one. And I'm going to remove all the scores at this point because I don't need this. So now I have this column here that's called match 1. So let's just go and take care of that step and we should be good to go. So I'm going to read this to a data frame, this location new. Let me just show you those data frames. So this is the location new. Oh, we have to read it to a data frame. So let's go do that. So that was the worksheet, not the data frame yet. So I'm going to look into this one, which is basically this. And the second one is that DF tickers. See, it has this CO clean. So that's the column I'm going to use to join with this match 1 column. So let's do that. So this will be regular panda merge. And I'm going to do a left join. We'll need to specify the left on and right on columns. So from the left table, that's going to be that match 1 column. And from the right table, we have that CO clean. Just to show you that, that would be this column. And I'm matching that with this match 1. So there it is. Now after that matching, see, we got the stocks. So let's just now save this and put it back in our spreadsheet. So I'm going to create a tab for this. Let's read that to a variable. Now let's make a list out of this. Actually, this, the data frame. Let's just check that list to make sure it looks right. I think that's pretty good. Let's just write it back to our spreadsheet. Here we go. Let's go check it out. And there we go. That looks pretty good. So if there is interest, I'll do another video to make this a little better as far as the speed. But for this one, this video is getting too long. I'm going to finish it on this. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.